im se svima, i malima i velikima, i bogatima i siromašnima, i slobodnjacima i robovima, dade žig na njihovu desnu ruku ili na čela njihova, te da nitko ne može ništa kupiti ili prodati, osim onoga ko ima žig ili ime zvijeri ili broj imena njezina.
Pozdrav, dragi narode, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Današnja tema je Finska. Zašto je to važno? Naime, Europa se snažno naoružava i stalno nam govore da nam prijeti opasnost od Rusije. Finska je zemlja koja ima jako dugu granicu sa Rusijom i potencijalno u tom sukobu može biti i bojno polje. Ona je ušla u NATO savez upravo prije 2 godine, 4. travnja, službeno, a zatražila je u svibnju 2022. nakon ruske invazije na Ukrajinu. Zato mi je veliko zadovoljstvo danas predstaviti nekoga koji je uistinu stručnjak i dugi niz godina radi u Briselu upravo po tom pitanjima, a dolazi iz Finske. Njegovo ime je gospodin Sakari Linden. Hello, Sakari. Welcome to our show in Croatia.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Can you say a few words about your biography?
Yes, with a pleasure. So I hold a master's degree in political science from the University of Turku, Finland. I also hold an LLM degree in international law from the University of Edinburgh from Scotland. Earlier, I worked as a parliamentary assistant in the Finnish parliament. I also hold an extensive experience from NGOs. For example, I have been a chairman and executive director. During the latest 8 years, I worked in the European Parliament, firstly as an accredited parliamentary assistant, and later a long time as a political advisor. From November last year, I have been an independent geopolitical analyst and consultant.
Well, great experience, and you are the right person to talk about today's subject. Well, we are facing that Europe is getting armed, and they are telling us there is a big danger from Russia attack. And Finland, your country, native country, it's on the border with Russia. It has a huge history with them. And you just 2 years ago became member of NATO. Can you put us through this history? What was happening with Finland in the history in last 10, 15 years with his neutrality, and now finally how that is became member of NATO?
Yeah, Finland joined the European Union in 1995, and it put us to the Western path. During the Cold War, our country was a neutral country, something between East and West, like Yugoslavia, for example, with the difference that whereas Yugoslavia was a uniparty socialist country, Finland was a multi-party market economy. And that time of neutrality provided Finland with independence, prosperity, and also security. But now we didn't have any problems with Russia between 1992 and 2022. But suddenly our leaders wanted to sacrifice our independence, our prosperity and security. And when Finland made an application to join the NATO, there was a huge propaganda campaign in Finnish media. Our mainstream media is totally pro-NATO, pro-EU. There is no alternative for that. And unfortunately, we don't seem to have very real democracy either, because all the parties in the Finnish parliament repeat the same message about idealization of Western value community and supremacy of the West, which is not true anymore, because we don't live in a unipolar world anymore. We are living in a multipolar world. And Finnish people, Finnish leaders didn't understand that actually putting ourselves in a frontier country in a great power battle can damage our country seriously, and even if very bad things happen, destroy our country.
Do you really think there is a big danger from side of Russia, not only for Finland, for Western countries, as you said?
as I said earlier, Finland didn't have any problems with Russia between 1992 and 2022. So all the problems with Russia are caused by the eastward expansion of NATO. And unfortunately, Finland has joined this campaign from 2022 on. And what is even more serious at the moment, our country signed and ratified DCA military agreement with the United States, according to which Finland hosts 15 military bases of the United States on Finnish soil. Finland's former president during the Cold War, Urho Kekkonen, said that Finland should never join the forces of Russia's enemy, because at the end of the day, Finland will lose its political independence and risks eventually to become a battlefield between Russia and the Western powers. And unfortunately, I see many negative signs about what President Kekkonen warned us about.
Is there any danger for other European countries? You are a member of European Union. If anybody attacks European Union, that means they attack you also.
No. Actually, if we can make a deal about non-expansion of Western military alliance, because all the problems regarding, for example, Ukraine and Georgia were created because of Western intentions to expand its military infrastructure and power networks to those countries. Now that Ukraine has been willing to join the NATO, it has huge problems, as every one of us can see. But if we compare to the situation to Georgia, they have a very sovereignist government which don't want to take sides between Russia and the collective West. They live totally peacefully, and that was the reason why US Biden's administration, as well as European Union, wanted to make a color revolution in Georgia in order to make Georgia a new battlefront against Russia. So direct answer to your question, I don't see any military danger from the part of Russia, as long as we can make a deal about non-expansion of Western military infrastructure and power networks.
Then what is your comment on rearming European Union? They said that they will really activate even, I think, 800 billion euros for rearming again, because they cannot anymore count on United States.
Yeah, the conflict in Ukraine is like a double-edged sword for the European Union. On the one hand, it's a great possibility, because during its history, European Union has always progressed towards the EU federation during the crisis. So they want to take everything out of this crisis and create constructions which enforce the cooperation and federative structures now in foreign and security policy. Secondly, they have seen their failure in their war. I say their war because they have invested so much in the war in Ukraine in terms of financial and military assistance to Ukraine. So they have seen their failure, and they really want to improve their military industry, what they intend to do at the moment. And finally, I see there is a certain division of labor between the European Union and the United States at the moment. The two-party system is like a kind of usual trick for the United States, because of change of power from from one party to another. It's a way to justify changes in their big geopolitical policy lines. But eventually, I see this situation as a division of labor, that United States, it's not anymore a hegemon. There is no unipolar world in the world, as Secretary of State of the US, Marco Rubio, also declared. There is no unipolar world anymore, but a multipolar world. And United States has to choose the most important regions militarily for itself. They can't take Europe, Middle East and East Asia simultaneously. Now they are retiring their forces from Europe and transferring them to East Asia because containment of China is much more important for them than containment of Russia. But this also means that United States wants European Union and United Kingdom to take more responsibility from containment of Russia.
Let's stay a little more in Brussels. You were there for 8 years. Can you explain us how this happened? What was transformation in this bureaucracy from European Union now to become so powerful, and they want to grab more power and improve it more, and using every crisis situation? We saw this in pandemic. Now we see in this war, they're using this to grab more power. And doesn't count that they are not elected directly from the people and for the people. They are elected with some kind of political trade.
Yes, as I already said, the European Union and their elites always want to take advantage of all the crises in order to make the EU federation, the EU unitary state to happen. And during all the crises during the late 10 or 15 years, like Eurozone debt crisis, then migration crisis, COVID crisis, and now the Ukraine conflict, they always want to respond to them by proposing EU federative responses of those. And what we have seen lately is that European Commission, which is undemocratic, composed of unelected leaders, they want to take the power out of the member states and little by little make EU Commission as a government of European Union. As there was the five presidents declaration, five presidents plan in 2015. They wanted to create a EU state by 2025, and now we are living in this year. So there is serious attempts to create EU federation and take all the independence and sovereignty out of the member states. The only possibility to avoid this is to start the process of individual member states to exit from the European Union. European Union cannot be reformed from within.
Conspiracy theorists would say that they are doing this crisis on purpose, because we could see these crises are coming, but they didn't care. It seems that they are like this kind of crisis. And what is important, you said that it's not possible to restructure from within. That means that the first step, what Great Britain done, leaving the EU, is the only way out.
Yes, exactly. I followed very closely the United Kingdom's exit negotiations from the EU. According to all mainstream propaganda, it was a total failure from the United Kingdom, but I see it totally differently. They were able to get the free trade with the EU common market, and they don't have to pay the membership fees anymore, and they didn't have to participate in those COVID plan of like share of transfers of income to other countries. So they have secured their free trade, and they don't have to take any more responsibility of those transfers of income. And what it comes to, if the EU has made it on purpose, for example, regarding the Ukraine crisis, we can see that NATO countries already before the start of the big conflict now from 2022 on, they wanted to arm Ukrainian army, and we have heard from French former President François Hollande and Germany's former Chancellor Angela Merkel that they didn't want to resolve the crisis in Ukraine. Like they didn't want to achieve the peace, but they just wanted to buy time in order to arm the Ukrainian army. So it it really feels like the collective West leaders really wanted to create the conflict in Ukraine on purpose.
Yeah, we saw this coming. Everybody who has any information saw that this conflict is coming already from 2014. Okay, we need to discuss about new approach from the side of the United States. But before that, can you explain us, you went to Murmansk and there was some conference there. What was there? What you've been talking about? Who was there? And what are conclusions?
Yes, with a great pleasure. So I received an invitation to speak in the Arctic Forum in Murmansk, which is sometimes called as the Russian capital of Russian Arctic. So what I talked about was the rights of indigenous peoples and their relationship with big businesses in the Russian Arctic. But what the Arctic Forum was a really big event, and it highlighted the importance of Arctic from the point of view of business and logistical roads. And there are everybody of us have heard the comments of US President Trump regarding Greenland, and it also highlights the importance of Arctic because more and more economic opportunities are being found in the Arctic. And the Arctic Forum was also about revealing opportunities regarding the new logistical routes like Northern Maritime Route, which could shorten the traffic transportation of freights hugely compared to transportation of freight from Asia through Suez Canal or nowadays what they have to do going around Africa. And what I saw there were very little Europeans present, but even more Chinese and even Indians. And absence of Western actors actually, little by little, is making BRICS an Arctic power. But what is very interesting, I saw some pieces of news at the end of February that simultaneously with the peace negotiations regarding Ukraine, United States is negotiating about re-establishing the commercial and other business ties in the Arctic region with Russia. This means that, again, the United States seem to succeed in its attempt to play European Union and other European countries out of business opportunities regarding Russia.
It seems to that United States, and I had some interviews before also, were playing games against European Union, and they are playing all the time like we are very good alliance. But final results are bad for European Union, concerns American policies, until, of course, now. Now everything is changing, but also not changing in favor of European Union.
Yes, I think many of us remember revelation of secret RAND Corporation report about relations towards EU and Russia. The main content from the report was that by raising tensions between EU and Russia, United States can eventually weaken the economic power of European countries and play them out as an economic competitor. And whether that was a real report, what I believe it is, it doesn't matter because the reality really shows that this has been the intention of the US administration.
Well, let's go back a little more in Finland. In potential conflict or war, Finland will be a battlefield. And you said that they are planning to build there 15 military bases from the United States. Is this new administration are continue with these plans, or there is any changes about it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. What are the plans of Trump regarding military bases on Finnish soil, and the DCA military agreement, which the United States of America has signed and ratified with Finland. Russian President Putin made a speech also in the Arctic Forum in Murmansk, and he said that he's concerned about rise of military activity from the part of new NATO countries, Finland and Sweden, in the Arctic region. And this really highlights the seriousness of the new situation, because during the Cold War, both Finland and Sweden were neutral countries, and there were almost no military tension in that region. It was a very peaceful area, and I would like to say that, in my view, it's not in the interest of Finnish and Swedish people that geopolitical and military tensions rise in our Baltic Sea region.
Before there was an alliance, a Nordic alliance, and the only country on North was Denmark and Norway were in NATO, Sweden and Finland were not. And you, in that position, you said that you had very good prosperity. Can you explain this?
Yeah, the key content in that Nordic cooperation was really that it was about economic and economic cooperation and cooperation between civil societies, and it was very important because that especially Finland, but also Sweden, were outside of the scope of military competition between Western Alliance and Soviet Union those days. But nowadays there are NATO aspirations they declare it themselves that they want to make Baltic Sea as a NATO lake, like excluding Russia from that. There have been serious tensions in the Gulf of Finland, which is part of the Baltic Sea, and there are plans from Estonian and Finnish government to block the entry and outwards going of Russian fleet and commercial fleet, which is a serious threat to militarily and economically to Russia. Most of Russian foreign trade goes on maritime routes from the Baltic state, and also the maritime connection between St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad region, a bit more southwards in the Baltic Sea, is of serious strategic importance for Russian Federation.
Well, you said, not only you, but there is others saying that new tariffs that they are coming from United States, that end of globalization, this part of globalization. But first process of globalization was of beginning of last century, and it lasted until First World War. Can you tell us what was happening then?
Yes, it can be said that the first era of globalization started in 1870. It was characterized by liberalization of economy, liberalization of trade between nations. And at the beginning of the 20th century, actually, the level of connectedness, the level of globalization was actually higher than about 10 years back from now on. What was the peak of our era's globalization? The first era of globalization stopped for the beginning of First World War, and everybody of us can just wish that this actually third era of globalization, which started in the 1980s, and I see this raise of tariffs from the part of Trump's administration as like really an end to the third era of globalization, and I really hope that this is not a similar kind of end to the era of globalization, which would mean the Third World War, than was the end of the first era of globalization. And I could also add that during the first era of globalization, the Great Britain wanted to liberate trade and trade between nations because it was a dominant player. But when it realized that it can't compete with like some other players like Germany anymore, they wanted to introduce more tariffs in trade, and little by little it stopped the era of globalization. I see a little similar pattern now. For a long time, United States was advocating for free trade and liberalization of economy, etc. But now, maybe a little bit more than 10 years back, they realized they can't compete with China and some other countries anymore. And now they are talking about imposing tariffs on trade and products coming from many countries.
What will be the impact of tariffs for Finland?
Yes, of course, it will worsen our situation, but our trade with United States hasn't been so remarkable. Much more important has been that the sanctions from the part of collective West, European Union, also from the part of United States, has totally distracted our trade with Russia. During the Cold War, sometimes trade of Finland with the Soviet Union was almost 30% of our total international trade. But at the moment, we have been totally got rid of that opportunity, and accordingly, we are becoming poorer. In our geopolitical situation, it would be our advantage to efficiently make a trade to all the directions. Yeah.
Usually in this kind of crisis, that means economical crisis first, far right, I said, right parties are coming in the power usually, and we see that increasement of these policies is present in France, present in Germany, also in other countries. What is the situation in Finland about this? Is there any strong right-wing party who is ready to take over the power after this crisis?
Unfortunately, we don't have like any kind of opposition in the national parliament. There is a so-called right populist, the Finnish party, which actually is totally aligned with the system. They don't, in important questions, they don't offer any real alternative. They are committed to the membership in the European Union. They are committed to Finland's membership in the Eurozone. They are committed to Finland's membership in the NATO, and they are totally committed to neoliberal economic system as well. What Finland would need would be a sovereignist alternative, which would take Finland out of the European Union, Eurozone, NATO, and make Finland again a neutral country in the increasingly multipolar world, and creating trade connections to all over the world. Of course, it's in our advantage to go on trading with the West also, but we can't accept that the collective West tries to prevent us from trading to other directions, like towards Russia, China, India, and all wide global West. Global South, I mean. But unfortunately, also on European level, I don't see too many alternatives, because many alternative parties have moderated themselves very efficiently. They have become a part of system which do not offer any alternative. And unfortunately, this is case with parties like Le Pen's RN party in France, Meloni's Fratelli d'Italia in Italy, Lega in Italy, and Vox in Spain, and many other so-called right populist parties. What's alternative for Germany? It's not totally clear yet, but I see some bad signs regarding the party, that eventually they are not that big an alternative than they many have wished for them to be.
At the same moment, you are in Eurozone, and Christine Lagarde, chief of European Central Bank, said that in this year, until October, they will finish implementing on central bank digital currency. What do you think about this implementation?
I think it's a bad thing because it's a risk for common normal citizens' privacy, and also it's a risk because it takes a further step out of the real economy, and I think this is also stemming from the fact that Eurozone's economy is under great danger. The debt levels not only in old crisis countries like Greece and Italy is increasing, but also at the heart of Europe in France. And if France's debt crisis explodes, it could mean the end of the Eurozone and thus also end of the whole European Union. So by taking a step from real economy to the digital currency, they want to avoid or at least throw it further, the economic crisis further away. And also this would be a step towards EU federation. I don't see it as a very positive proposal.
I heard lots of sounds that saying that central bank digital currency is here to control all transactions. They want to control us. They have some tools. For example, during the pandemic, they use these tools in Canada. And now in the future, potential emergency situation of international concerns or some other crisis, they can use power of central bank digital currency to control behavior of citizens.
Yeah, yes, as I said, it's a risk towards privacy of people, and I'm also afraid it's a path towards total control of people's lives about social credit system, and it's very ironic because on the other hand, European Union leaders are praising that European Union is an oasis of civil liberties and all kind of freedoms and human rights. Seemingly, there is a clear difference between their what they preach and what is the reality in the European Union.
Yeah, we faced these examples during pandemic, and they said that they will use this example crisis who is coming, and this crisis is climate crisis. Now, after Trump left Paris Agreement, what is the view of Finland about climate changes and this climate crisis, as they call it?
I think that somehow European Union leaders are also willing to sacrifice those climate goals because they have already made their purpose. They have been able to progress in EU federation path because of those climate policies. Now I think their concentration is more in those programs called Rearming Europe, developing their military industry. I feel like even European Union is little by little starting to forget about those climate policies under pressure from the real politics.
Well, I heard just a few days ago that Ursula von der Leyen is still standing on the same path. She said that some parts in Asia are warming much faster than others, and we still need to stay on this path for decarbonization. And also they're telling us that's the must because scientists says we are endangering our climate. And now it's strange. How come that any more scientists are not important and protection of this planet is not important? They are ready to change their policies. What is your opinion? Why they are changing this?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if they really want to stick to the path in their climate policies, because there is a huge pressure from the United States because they are using changing their climate policies. And if they don't change that, there is really huge pressure towards European industries, and it can be seen as amounts of unemployed people, as number of failed companies in the European Union area.
What about immigration crisis? We are facing that. Really, there's a huge crisis in Germany. I had the interview with Christine Andersen. She told me everything about it. We saw already this crisis in France, Denmark, Netherlands. Most of capital cities in Europe are already almost 50% of inhabitants are immigrants. How is this situation in Finland?
Yeah, Finland was also under pressure during the migration crisis of 2015. When Angela Merkel said that they have open doors policy, Finland immediately followed the same policy. And actually, the state-owned railway company of Sweden brought a huge number of asylum seekers to Finnish border, and they crossed the border, and Finnish army soldiers came to carry their bags. And compared to our normal numbers of asylum seekers before that crisis, it was huge. It was like 35,000 asylum seekers during 2015. And I see that as a kind of impetus for European Union policies also, because nowadays I think I see that European Union leaders are talking about effective border controls, surveillance of external borders of the Schengen area. And actually, it's not good. In my view, it's very clear that sovereign independent states have to take care of their own borders, and European Union shouldn't have anything to do with those sovereign rights and sovereign responsibilities of member states. I don't want European Union to use that kind of migration crisis in order to advance its own federative goals. I could also add regarding the migration crisis of 2015 in Finland that more than 30,000 asylum seekers came across the Swedish borders, and simultaneously there were a few thousand across the border of border between Finland and Russia. But all the mainstream media blamed Russia on purposefully creating a migration crisis, and this is totally nonsense, because the most of them came from Sweden. But also during latest years, also the right populist Finnish party has blamed Russia, because there were some asylum seekers which came across the border towards Russia. But at the same time, all the time, more and more asylum seekers come across Sweden. So this migration crisis, not only it's not used only for the purpose of EU federation, but also for geopolitical purposes, in order to put pressure against Russia. And I can just say that this is total nonsense.
Well, I saw there was a crisis. I just went there in Sweden, and at that time they had a huge crisis with gangs. Gangs are mostly organized by people who came to Sweden, not domestic one. Is there any crisis this kind in Finland?
Yeah, one can say that Finland is maybe 20 years backwards from Sweden in terms of migration problems and all the phenomenon regarding the migration. Whereas there is a big crisis of migration criminality in Sweden at the moment, it's not at the same level in Finland, but actually those migration gangs are spreading to Finland. But also there are, little by little, there are new so-called street gangs, which are mostly composed of people of immigration background.
Well, you were advisor for a long time. Let's imagine that you are now advisor of Ursula von der Leyen, and she asks you for help, how to settle this problem. You have problem presently with US tariffs. You have problem with threatening of Russia, so-called. You need to rearm your Europe again. At the same time, you have a green transition, and that costs you lots of money. And of course, at the same time, you have a war in Ukraine that you're financing. What would be your advice about these points for Ursula von der Leyen?
I would straight away advise her to break up the whole European Union, put an end to the European Union. We don't need that kind of continent-wide source of bureaucracy and undemocratic community. What we need are independent sovereign nation states in Europe. And if they like, they can create confederations on their own between different countries. That would put democracy back, and with democracy, responsibility for those democratically elected leaders of European nation states. We can't have democracy in Europe because there is no nation. And democracy and nation is always connected to each other. And also from the geopolitical perspective, we can't have a similar geopolitical, economic, or other kind of policy lines which fit to all different parts of Europe. Southern Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, Eastern Europe, they all those nation states there have totally different interests from different perspectives, and they should be able, with their independence and sovereignty, to advance their own interests.
Yes, and beside everything, they have really different history and culture in most things, and that's why maybe we cannot understand each other so well. If they are trying to press us hard and implement something like, for example, this woke ideology, they are pressing hard and they want all of us to follow it.
Yes, it's very, very, very natural that there is different kind of history in different parts of Europe. French anthropologist and geopolitical scientist Emmanuel Todd has written many very good books about the anthropology of family structures, and that brings different kinds of societies for different parts of Europe as well. A certain kind of family structure, like a nuclear family, will bring more liberty and also democracy to certain part of Europe, for example, to Western Europe, whereas other kind of family structures, which are more hierarchical, they bring more hierarchy and control in societies. And but the illusion of Western liberal globalism has been that we can see all the countries in the world only from the certain Western liberal point of view. But this is totally against real cosmopolitanism, which recognizes that there are different continents, different countries, different cultures, different societies, etc. And one of the benefits of this end of era of globalization is that we could start to recognize diversity of world cultures and different value systems again. And what highlights this is democracy and the different forms of democracy which exist in different parts of the world.
Thank you, Sakari. I hope that your country will not be a battlefield, and I hope that things will change in a different way than we see now, because information that we are receiving every day are not optimistic. It was a very pleasure to talk with you, to have your view from side of country who is a first neighbor of somebody they're calling threat for the future.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure participating.
Thank you. Evo, dragi narode, htio sam vam dočarat kako razmišljaju ljudi, bar oni koji su upućeni, sa prve linije, potencijalne prve linije opasnosti za koju mi slušamo svakodnevno da dolazi. Naime, moramo biti svjesni da to novo naoružavanje Europe će nas jako skupo koštati. Naime, mi smo kao Hrvatska ušli u NATO kako bi manje izdvajali za naoružanje, kako bi imali zaštitu od velikih i snažnih sila u potencijalnim obrambenim situacijama i kako bi bili sigurniji. Za to smo izdvojili i dio svog suvereniteta, smanjili smo vojsku, ukinuli smo i vojni rok i istovremeno smatrali smo da smo sigurni. Međutim, nedugo nakon toga, jer prošlo je svega 20 godina, čak i manje, mi svjedočimo da se sve mijenja i da ponovo moramo krenuti nekim drugim smjerom. Da li to znači da netko prije 15-20 godina nije to mogao vidjeti? Ne, to ne znači to. Mogli su vidjeti. Zašto nisu htjeli vidjeti? To moramo pitati sve naše političare koji smo dobro iskusili kako su se uglavnom vrlo jeftino prodavali za neke svoje sinekure ili vrlo male interese. Da ne spominjem neke slučajeve kao što je MOL i INA, da ne spominjem ulazak u eurozonu gdje nisu pitali građane da li žele da se odreknemo kune, nego su jednostavno smatrali da je to dio njihove politike i kako smo nakon toga odmah dobili snažnu inflaciju i kako će ta inflacija se nastaviti, jer ovih 800 milijardi koliko planiraju Europska unija uložiti, to je novac koji će novo nastati, tako se kaže, isprintati. Zadužit ćemo se za to kao što smo se zadužili za oporavak od pandemije, za 750 milijardi po ondašnjim cijenama, što izađe preko 1100 milijardi eura. Danas je to inflacija koju osjećajemo, a sutra ćemo zbog naoružavanja, jer nam kažu kako nam prijeti opasnost od Rusije. Da li ćemo vjerovati da nam stvarno prijeti opasnost i da li je ta opasnost realna? Nije loše čuti sve one koji stoje na prvoj liniji potencijalne buduće opasnosti, odnosno rata, kao što je Finska. Evo, ja sam zbog toga i danas pozvao gospodina koji je dugi niz godina i analizirao te stvari i savjetovao u Briselu i koji može iz prve ruke reći malo drugačiji pogled od onog što mi svakodnevno slušamo od naših političara, mainstream medija koji opet, kao i u pandemiji, kao u svakoj drugoj krizi, pušu u isti rog sa službenom politikom. Kako je moguće da nitko ne promatra sa strane, ne bude neka opozicija i kritički razmišlja, nego se stalno ponavljaju ti promotivni obrasci u kome netko tko je izvor novaca kaže što je narativ, a ostali samo ponavljaju kao papige. A nas, običan narod, koji smo porezni obveznici, sve to plaćamo kroz ne samo poreze, nego i skuplja dobra, dakle inflaciju. Mi na kraju sve to platimo i moramo slijediti taj put koji nas očigledno vodi ne samo u opasnost, nego i u siromaštvo. Dakle, moj cilj je ovim emisijama donijeti drugi pogled, da razmislite da postoji svijet mimo onoga koji nam prikazuju mainstream svakodnevno i naši službeni političari, jer taj svijet je puno veći od onoga što mi mislimo da je i živi neke svoje živote, što ste evo imali prilike vidjeti, što je sam gospodin rekao da je bio u toj konferenciji Murmansku i oni razmišljaju o nečem sasvim drugom, ne bave se uopće nama, o Europskom unijom. A mi, kao što vidite, smo sada i napušteni od strane Sjedinjenih država, jer je Trump obećao svojim glasačima da će biti America first. I uistinu America je first. Je li to dobro za njih? Je li to dobro za nas? Vrijeme će pokazati, ali to je današnje stanje. Ja se nadam da ste bili zadovoljni sa ovom emisijom, sa mojim gostom i uskoro se vidimo u sljedećoj epizodi Slobodni.
Nitko vas neće natjerati da se poklonite zvijeri, učinit ćete to svojevoljno, odbacujući vjeru. Bićete laka meta za zvijeri, jer se niste podredili vjeri. Ako se ne podredite vjeri, podredit ćete se zvijeri. Toliko ćete se suobličiti sa ovim svijetom, da nećete ni prepoznati da ste u zabludi. Biće to najveća demonska prevara ikada i pravedno zaslužena osuda nad nepokajanim grešnicima.
Gdje su svi oni